Hello and welcome to Mindset Mondays with DTK. It is Monday morning at 10 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock British Summer Time, and 10 p.m. in the Pacific Rim. Thank you for joining. The Mindset Mondays is a ongoing series of weekly live broadcasts designed for those who have a growth mindset or those who'd like to create one. It's an opportunity for folk to play with new ideas, try on new concepts, and dance with new mindsets. All right, so if you'll take a moment and just below the video, please click share to share this with your community. Invite your folks, your friends, your colleagues to join the conversation. All right, let's dive in. The quote we get to play with today is it's by a guy named Wallace Wattles, right? The very best thing you can do for the whole world is to make the most of yourself. All right, again, the very best thing you can do for the whole world is to make the most of yourself. So this is one that I've played with a good bit. I had a lot of thoughts about this one as it came up in my feed to build the email for this broadcast. And it's interesting. It's easy to get contorted. It's easy to get wrapped around the axle, doing what you think you should do, um, or being what you think the world says you should be. I go back to digital positions. I go back to the web company years ago. I've had a couple experiences, one with that company, one with this coaching practice of getting contorted like that. The idea that there's a growth curve that we should follow. There's a growth pattern that we should follow. There's a bigger, better, faster, more ethos that we're supposed to dive into, supposed to, should, ought to, have to. Those are all external motivators. Those are all indicative of somebody else's should, an outside ideal, something that is foisted upon us. When you go back to Don Miguel Ruiz, it's an inherited agreement. It's not one that's inherently ours. Now, it may be true, but notice when the voice that says you should be bigger, you should grow the company, you should amp up like this, you should be doing X, Y, and Z. When the language that surfaces initially is a should, chances are it's somebody else's voice, it's somebody else's drivers, cultural, parent, mentor, you name it. It can come from anywhere. There was a belief that we had to be bigger, we had to grow, instead of scaling deeper with the clients we were serving, or getting better at what it is that we were doing, improving that which we were already beginning to learn and to master and to grow into. And when you scale wide too soon, the results can be disastrous. You lose focus on what you're doing for your clients. You lose focus on the process that you're learning. You lose flow, right? You lose the smooth part. Paul Jarvis wrote a book, happens to have been a web developer. Paul Jarvis wrote a book recently called A Company of One. And here I will drop that into the comments so that you've got a link to that. Paul's book is remarkable. It's the opportunity to, instead of everybody telling him you need to flesh out your web development practice and bring in more staff and expand what you can do and serve a larger audience and bulk up like an agency. I was like, what if that's not what I want to do? What if I just want to go deeper? What if I just want to get stronger and better at doing what I do and serve my clients more fully and more deeply and stay that company of one? How do I hone my craft there and elevate my income there instead of having to amp up income by amping up expenses and bulking up the company? And there's a real opportunity to get refocused on what it is that you want to do. That's the game. The doing what you should be doing is not the game. If there's a should, this quote captures it. This is what Wallace was getting at, right? The idea that the very best thing you can do for the whole world is make the most of yourself. And in so doing, you have the opportunity to really shine. In order to serve the world, you must serve yourself first. And that doesn't mean self-centered, right? And skewing towards narcissistic. This is not about it being all about you, right? This is about you can't give what you haven't got. What I mean by serving yourself first is you've got to make sure you're being fed so that you can feed others. I'll take this even deeper. I have a philosophical belief that there's no such thing as altruism in our cultural experience. You take altruism in the animal community, it's to the point of in service of another surrendering your life. But look at it. The example that people give so often in a conversation about altruism is that Mother Teresa was ultimately an altruist. And I don't believe that. I don't believe altruism exists in humans. I just don't. I think that if what Mother Teresa was doing to serve those that she served, walking through the streets with the untouchables in Calcutta, if that didn't serve something in her, whether it be her faith or her internal drivers, it's irrelevant. If it didn't feed her, if it didn't nurture her soul, she wouldn't have done it. She was very attentive to making sure that she was fed and rested so that she could tirelessly serve the poor. She cared for herself so that she could care for others. The work that she did in the world nurtured her soul. Otherwise, she wouldn't have done it. There is no such thing as altruism. You have to care for yourself first. It's selfish in service of. And anytime and every time I bring this up, I get flack. So yeah, Steve, Charlotte, all you folks that are on, would love to get your thoughts on how this lands for you. Because I'm always fascinated by who enjoys this idea and who gets flummoxed by it. Um, the that concept that no, we have very complex kids, and my wife's entire practice is a global resource for parents of kids with complex needs. We see this all the time when parents have $1 to spend, a minute to spare, or an iota of energy left. They spend it on the kids, and that's why so many of the parents burn out and so many of the relationships or implode and end, the parenting relationships, and why so many co-parenting relationships, even after a marriage dissolves, um, fall apart. It's about nurturing yourself so that you can nurture others. It's not nurturing yourself instead of or at the expense of others. That's being self-centered. And it's not caring for self. What do you mean they're others? That's narcissism. This is about selfish in service of. If you're depleted, well, you've got nothing else for others. If you can't be there for yourself, you can't be there for others. If you're not doing your own work, how can you help others do their work? It's even we even talk about in the coaching community, we do this work on ourselves so we can do this work in the world. So I think, what comes up for me with this one is how do we create the kind of flow in our world where part of our day to day is actually attending to and caring for self? And how do we keep the focus on that, on how do we maintain that desire to serve others and care for others while caring for self. I used to joke I was in college during mid to late Reagan, and so many of the folks I went to school with, we just, bright-eyed. I don't want to say liberals necessarily, because that wasn't really what it was. It was just this desire to change the world, and they were idealists. And so many of the folks that I graduated with went on to, white collar boot camp in the then Big Six consulting or into the financial services on Wall Street, and had the opportunity to make a crap ton of money. And the idea was, when I make my money, I will be able to change the world. And so many of them drove and drove and drove. And the ones that didn't end up in jail, if you're curious, look up all the junk bonds and Michael Milken and that whole era. A lot of my classmates were in on Wall Street during that period. And you look at that, so many of these folks made that crap ton of money. And when they slowed down and had the chance to enjoy it, they'd forgotten that idealism. They were no longer in touch with what it was that they wanted to do for the world and be in the world. And I don't mean to generalize the entire class. That was just sort of the Gordon Gekko greed is good wing of the class. And then to look at, how do we now, knowing what we know now, keep that drive, keep that idealism, keep that urge, that leadership push to change the world, to make this place better than we found it, and still care for ourselves while we do that? How do we make sure that we stay focused on making the most of ourselves so that we can have the most impact that we want in the world? I think that's the playground here. And as Steve said, you need to put your oxygen on mask first before you care for others. Anytime we're on an airplane, we hear that message, but we don't listen. And we certainly don't listen in our day-to-day lives. So that's the opportunity this week. Pay attention to what it is that you need so that you can be of service. What is it that you need so that you can serve your team, the team that you lead, or the company or the organization or the community or the family that you lead? What is it that you need to be better in service of those that you serve? What is it that you need to be better in service of the work you're trying to do in the world? What is it that you need? I love it. Thank you, Charlotte. What's in the cup for you? What's overflow for others? Right. So maybe that's starting with the right cup of coffee, Charlotte. So what is it that you need so that your overflow, so that there is an overflow that's available for others? How do you fill your cup? So look at your world, look at your heart, and identify, what is it that you need? Not what you should need and what you should be doing, what you should want and what you should give, but listen for that voice from inside. So as with every week, I ask, between now and next Monday, what mindset will you choose?